Welcome to The Deep Dive. I want you, the listener, to try and imagine a specific scenario for just a second.
Okay, lay it on us.
Picture yourself trying to build a massive global enterprise. We are talking about an organization that isn't just spanning continents, but establishing a complex international diplomatic network.
Right, a massive undertaking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now imagine trying to execute all of that right after a completely devastating country-ruining war. You have absolutely zero capital, none.
And probably a lot of pushback.
Oh, intense, deeply entrenched political opposition at every single turn. Oh, and your grand global headquarters.
Don't tell me.
It's a literal coal briquette storage room.
I mean, that sounds like the pitch for an incredibly unrealistic historical fiction movie.
It really does. It sounds completely absurd. But that is exactly the reality we're unpacking today.
Yeah.
For this deep dive, we're pulling from excerpts of Chapter 4 of Sun Myung Moon's Autobiography. The chapter is specifically titled Sacrifice and Enterprise, Founding a Global Mission.
And what's the goal for today?
Our mission today is to explore how this movement bootstrapped its way from the extreme, desperate poverty of post-war Korea to a massive international presence.
A really fascinating transition.
And we're going to look at how they pulled it off using this wild collision of high-level geopolitical vision and some incredibly surprising microscopic money-making tactics.
Before we get into the mechanics of those tactics, though, I need to step in and establish a crucial guideline for you, the listener.
Definitely.
The source material we are analyzing today touches heavily on politically charged history, deep religious themes, and very specific geopolitical strategies.
It's heavy stuff.
It is. So it's essential to explicitly state right up front that we are not here to take sides.
Oh.
We're not endorsing the religious doctrines, nor are we validating or refuting the political viewpoints presented in this text.
Right.
Our goal is strictly and impartially to analyze the source material. We're here to extract the factual historical claims, the strategic thinking, and the underlying philosophies exactly as the author recorded them.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the opening scene the author paints is just incredibly stark. It really sets the tone for everything that follows.
Paint the picture for us.
So, the author has just been released from Seodaemun prison. He immediately goes to the Gabsa Buddhist temple on Mount Gyeron.
In Chungcheong province.
Yes. And the reason he retreats to this mountain is entirely visceral. He needs to physically heal from the wounds of being tortured in that prison.
And if we look at the broader historical context of South Korea at this exact moment, that scene carries an even heavier weight.
How so?
This is shortly after the armistice of the Korean War. The country's infrastructure is completely decimated.
Right.
Moon describes a reality where simply finding enough food to survive the day was a difficult, ongoing struggle for the average person.
People are literally starving. I mean, he even mentions that they don't have a church building large enough to hold their existing very small group of members for a standard service.
Just daily survival was the main focus for most people.
Exactly. But despite all of this immediate life or death struggle, he goes into this forest specifically to look out into the distant future.
Yeah, he's planning.
He is sitting in the woods, healing from severe physical trauma, surrounded by a starving populace, and he decides it is time to map out a global strategy.
It's audacious.
And that starts with what sounds like an impossible mission to Japan.
It really is a fascinating pivot. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the relationship between Korea and Japan at this time was completely non-existent.
Basically hostile, right?
Totally hostile. Following the end of Japanese colonial rule in 1945, there were no diplomatic relations at all. Japan did not recognize the government in Seoul. The borders were essentially sealed, and Korea quite literally considered Japan to be an enemy country.
The memory of suffering under colonial rule was fresh, so Korea was rebuffing any suggestion of opening contacts with Japan.
But the author's strategy was survival.
Right, so in 1958, the author calls a man named Bong Choon Choi to meet him on the mountain behind that temple.
And he gives him a directive.
A direct order. He tells Choi to go to Japan immediately and do not come back until you have succeeded in establishing a mission.
Just like that.
Just like that. How does someone even process a command like that?
In a standard organizational structure, an employee or a follower would undoubtedly have a dozen logistical questions.
Like, how am I getting there?
Right. What is the budget? Where am I staying? Do I have a visa?
But Choi doesn't ask a single one. He simply replies, yes, without any hesitation.
Incredible.
They sing a Korean Christian hymn together. The lyrics start, Called of God, we honor the call. Lord, will go wherever you say.
And then they just head down the mountain.
It is just raw, audacious faith. But practically speaking, travel wasn't even allowed between the two countries.
No, it was completely illegal.
So how does one man just go start a movement in a hostile nation?
He essentially has to become an international smuggler. Because travel isn't permitted, Choi has to smuggle himself into Japan without a visa.
And how does that go for him?
He gets caught almost immediately upon arrival.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he gets thrown into prison in Hiroshima. From there, he is moved to Yamaguchi, where he sits in a cell waiting to be deported back to Korea.
So it's a completely failed mission right out of the gate.
Exactly. But Choi decides he would rather die than fail and be sent back.
So what does he do?
He initiates a hunger strike right there in the Japanese prison.
A hunger strike in a foreign prison is a really dangerous game.
Yeah.
How does the Japanese government react to that kind of escalation?
They are put in a really difficult position. Choi develops a severe fever from the fasting.
He's actually dying.
Right, and the Japanese authorities don't want an international incident involving a Korean national dying in their custody.
That makes sense.
So they transfer him to a local hospital to recover before they process his deportation. And it's while he is in this hospital that he manages to break out of custody.
He escapes.
He escapes the hospital, evades the authorities, and spends the next year and a half operating entirely underground.
Just living as a fugitive.
Yes, risking his life to officially establish the Japanese church by October 1959.
I am just trying to wrap my head around the psychological toll of that.
It's massive.
And there is a massive financial toll on the home front, too. The author put all other work aside in Korea. He sat in a small room, refusing to eat or sleep, just praying until he knew Choi had safely crossed the strait.
And the financial sacrifice of the community was just as intense. The church took out a staggering loan of 1.5 million won just to send him.
You really have to pause and reflect on the gravity of that number.
Keep in mind, this is a community where members literally had nothing to eat.
They were starving.
They were starving themselves to take on immense financial debt, all to fund a smuggling operation into an enemy country because they believed this global vision was that critical.
And the gamble actually pays off. Choi's extreme sacrifice eventually attracts a highly influential Japanese youth leader named Osamu Kuboki.
That was the turning point.
Yeah, a whole group of young people follow Kuboki, securely establishing the Japanese foundation. And remember, this is 1959.
Korea and Japan wouldn't even establish official diplomatic relations for another 6 years.
But the author doesn't wait around to celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
He is already moving on to the next massive target.
America.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here is the rapid succession of these international moves. They barely have a foothold in Japan, yet in January 1959, they send a woman named Young Eun Kim to the United States.
She was a professor, right?
Yes, she had been fired from Ifa Women's University for her affiliation with the movement. Then, in September of that same year, they send another missionary, David S.C. Kim.
And the way they get to America is dripping with historical irony.
Oh, absolutely.
Unlike the Japan mission where Choi had to smuggle himself across the water, the missionaries heading to the U.S. actually secure official passports and visas.
But the wild part is who helps them secure those documents.
Right. It was the exact same cabinet ministers of the Liberal Party who had previously helped get the author imprisoned in Sireman prison.
It really highlights a radical shift in their political environment. The very regime that had locked him up a few years prior was now, through bureaucratic channels, facilitating his global expansion.
But pushing into America wasn't a universally celebrated idea within the church, was it?
Not at all. Internally, this move faced heavy resistance.
Why?
This raises an important question. Why focus on America when the Korean foundation was still so fragile?
Yeah, you have to look at it from the perspective of the average member. America was a wealthy, English-speaking superpower on the other side of the globe.
Meanwhile, the foundation of the church in Korea was still incredibly impoverished.
Many members actively opposed sending missionaries to the U.S.
Yeah.
They wanted to build up the local base and secure their own survival first.
Which makes total sense from a traditional business or organizational standpoint.
Right. You secure your home market before expanding overseas, especially when your members are currently starving.
But the author hits them with this completely counterintuitive logic.
He tells his members that unless America's crisis could be resolved, Korea would be destroyed too.
It is a profound shift in scale. He isn't viewing the survival of his movement, or even his country, as a local issue.
He sees the big picture.
He views the Cold War geopolitical landscape as deeply interconnected. The work they were beginning in America was explicitly aimed at stabilizing the entire world.
Because he believed that was the only way to ultimately secure a future for Korea.
Exactly.
So he is projecting this multi-continent vision, but expanding into America and Japan simultaneously requires an immense amount of capital.
Huge amounts.
How on earth does an impoverished post-war movement bankroll a global presence when its members are literally skipping meals?
This brings us to the author's strict philosophy on money, which he called sacred business. He lays out some very rigid rules for generating these funds.
What were the rules?
First, he fundamentally opposed just taking money from the members for overseas missions.
Even though they needed it.
He knew the expansion required real capital, but he insisted the funds had to be earned honorably by the church itself through business.
Okay.
Second, business operations had to be strictly honest, absolutely no lying or deceptive practices. And third, they were never allowed to take a profit of more than 30% on any venture.
Wait, a 30% cap?
Yes.
From a standard business perspective, if you are trying to fund a global expansion from scratch, you need to maximize every single penny of profit.
That's the conventional wisdom.
Why artificially limit your growth like that when you're already starting from zero?
Because for him, the philosophy dictated the outcome. He believed the purpose of business wasn't merely to accumulate wealth.
Right.
The purpose was to support missionary work, which he viewed as the work of God. If the money is earned honorably, without exploiting the consumer, and then spent prayerfully with clear intent, the funds themselves become sacred.
So maximizing profit through exploitation would taint the very foundation of the global mission. Okay, so they need these sacred funds, but they still have zero initial capital to invest in a business. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Go hustle.
Yes, because the author comes up with what might be the ultimate bootstrap hack.
It's brilliant.
He tells his members that they should be writing letters to each other. Specifically, he suggests they write to each other at least 3 times a month.
Okay. Sounds normal so far.
Now, at the time, mailing a standard letter costs 41. Normally, you just buy a single 41 stamp, stick it on the envelope, and you're done.
Right.
But he tells them, no, do not use 141 stamp. I want you to cover the envelope in 40 individual 1/1 stamps.
It seems intensely tedious and completely counterproductive at first glance.
Exactly. Just imagine the sheer mind-numbing tediousness of licking 40 individual stamps for a single letter 3 times a month.
But it was brilliant arbitrage.
Because after the letters were mailed and delivered, the members would collect those envelopes and carefully peel off all those canceled postage stamps.
They took these used, canceled stamps, which the post office and everyone else considered complete trash, and they organized them to sell to international stamp collectors.
By finding value in something so microscopic, they managed to make 1,000,000 won in the first year alone.
It is a masterclass in leveraging hidden microcapital. When you have no traditional funding, you are forced to look for value in the margins of society that everyone else overlooks.
And they sustained this specific operation for 7 years.
They didn't just stop at stamps either.
Oh, right. They also started hand-coloring black and white photographs.
They would take photos of famous places or popular entertainment personalities and painstakingly paint them by hand, then sell those to the public.
They were literally funding a global diplomatic and religious expansion by selling canceled 1/1 stamps and hand-painted pictures of celebrities.
But eventually, as any entrepreneur knows, stamps and photos cannot sustain a truly global mission forever.
The scale is just too small.
Yeah, right. The overhead of international diplomacy eventually outpaces microcapital. They needed to scale up and take their enterprise to an industrial level.
Which brings us to 1962.
And a massive conceptual leap.
The lathe.
Yes. They scraped together their sacred funds and purchased a Japanese lathe that had been abandoned since the end of colonial rule in 1945.
And they purchased it just before the South Korean government redenominated the national currency.
Let's clarify that for the listener because that's a crucial economic detail.
Yeah, please explain.
In 1962, the government essentially changed the value of the currency to curb inflation and bring underground money into the open economy.
So the church bought the lathe for 720,000 old won.
And after the redenomination, that equated to 72,000 new won. To put that in perspective, the author helpfully pegs this to the US dollar at the time.
It was an official investment of exactly $576.
$576.
For one old, abandoned, used piece of machinery.
And the setting for this new industrial empire is just as humble.
Oh, the visual is amazing. They take this single lathe and they stick it in the coal briquette storage room of an enemy property house they were using as a church space.
And they give this dirty coal room a very grand name.
Tongal Industries.
Imagine standing there as a follower.
Yeah.
You are a member who has been fasting, selling canceled stamps, struggling to survive in an agrarian economy that is still rebuilding from a war.
You're exhausted.
Your leader brings you to a literal coal storage room, points to a single decades-old machine, and delivers a prophecy about the industrial future of the nation.
He tells them, to you, this lathe may seem insignificant. But then he prophesies that this one machine will multiply.
He says it will become 7,000 lathes and eventually 70,000 lathes.
He stands in that coal room and tells them that this single piece of metal will develop alongside Korea's defense and automobile industries.
This is a perfect example of his visionary leadership style.
How so?
He is using a physical object, the lathe, to anchor his followers' faith in a totally abstract future.
Predicting a thriving automobile industry in 1962 Korea, which had virtually no domestic auto manufacturing at the time, was a staggering conceptual leap.
He demanded that they have absolute conviction that this massive industrial future would happen.
And the followers responded with utter dedication.
Which leads them to their next massive leap just 1 year later, in 1963.
They decide to start a business on an even larger scale.
Moving from the coal room to the shipyard.
Exactly. They build an actual fishing boat.
It's launched at a pier in the Mansuk-dong section of Incheon.
And they christen it the Cheon Sung Ho, which translates to the victory of heaven. 200 people show up to watch this boat get sent out onto the ocean.
The Cheon Sung Ho sailed the Yellow Sea and was successful at catching fish. But internally, there was significant pushback from the members once again.
People were complaining.
They were asking why they were complicating their lives. They felt they had more than enough work to do on land with the church and the new factory.
Why divert resources to go out onto the ocean to catch fish?
It's that same localized survival mode thinking cropping up again.
Just like when they didn't want to send missionaries to America.
Exactly. So how does the author justify this pivot to the sea?
Well, his rationale for the boat is deeply philosophical, not just economic.
He explains to them that water is the fundamental source of life.
He points out that every human being is born from their mother's womb, and inside that womb is water. Therefore, humanity is born from water.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does a biological fact about being born from water translate into building a commercial fishing business?
He believed that because we receive our initial life from water, there is a spiritual and practical necessity to return to it.
Interesting.
He taught his followers that they needed to go out onto the actual literal ocean and pass through a series of chaotic, unpredictable trials there.
Because the ocean represents an environment you absolutely cannot control.
Right. Only by surviving the harsh, untamed trials of the sea would they build the internal fortitude necessary to survive the complex trials they were going to face on land.
Wow. So the boat wasn't just about catching fish or generating revenue.
It was literally a psychological training ground for survival.
Yes, and it was deeply prophetic. While the members saw a single wooden boat catching fish in the Yellow Sea, the author wrote that he sensed the world was about to enter what he called an oceanic era.
He viewed the launching of the Cheon Sung Ho as a small but precious first step into that new global paradigm.
In his mind, he wasn't just looking at one boat. He was already picturing vast oceans filled with massive fleets of ships, much larger and faster than the one they had just built.
So what does this all mean when we look at the entire picture? We've covered an almost unbelievable amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with a man sitting in a mountain forest, trying to physically heal from prison torture while surrounded by a starving country.
From there, we watched him launch an international smuggling operation into a hostile nation, resulting in hunger strikes and hospital escapes.
We saw the profound political irony of his former enemies, helping him secure visas to a global superpower.
We examined a deeply ethical yet highly resourceful approach to business.
Capping profits to keep the mission pure, but finding hidden capital in the absolute margins of society through arbitrage.
Bankrolling global diplomacy by peeling canceled 1-1 stamps and painstakingly hand-painting black and white photos.
And then taking that microscopic capital, buying a single $576 abandoned lathe, sticking it in a coal briquette room, and utilizing visionary scaling to prophesy the foundation of a nation's defense and auto industries.
And finally, launching a boat not just to fish, but to purposefully conquer the chaos of the ocean to prepare for the trials of the land.
This historical account is the ultimate collision of high-level global geopolitical strategy with the most hyper-focused, gritty execution imaginable.
And this brings us to the so what for you, the listener. What is the practical application of this deep dive?
Yeah, how does this apply today?
When you find yourself facing overwhelming odds or you feel completely paralyzed by a severe lack of resources, this history shows that scale is largely a matter of perspective.
You don't necessarily need endless capital, perfect conditions, or a fully mapped out logistical plan to think globally.
Sometimes you just need the sheer audacity to look at an old abandoned lathe or a canceled 1-1 stamp and see the foundation of an empire.
Exactly. It's about your vision dictating your reality, rather than your current reality dictating your vision.
Well said.
And that leaves us with one final lingering thought for you to chew on today.
Let's hear it.
We just talked about the author's philosophy regarding the ocean, this profound idea that we must purposefully face the unpredictable, chaotic trials of the water to become capable of surviving the trials we face on solid ground.
Right.
So, looking at your own life, what is your ocean? Where is that wild, unpredictable environment that you are currently avoiding, but that you actually need to plunge into and conquer before you can truly find your footing on land?
This raises an important question for all of us to consider.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Catch you next time.